my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and I am aware that I've taken a bit of a hiatus. I did intend to take a bit of a hiatus. I had a surgery in February. Don't worry, I'm fine. But I absolutely meant to take February off, and then that just sort of extended into March. And now it's the middle of April, and it's really time for me to be back. I have many videos I want to make, and I don't know how I'm going to prioritize them, but the easiest one it felt like for me to film today was an unhaul. The last couple years I've done a bit of an unhaul video around New Year's, and I kind of missed all of my end of year wrap up, beginning of the new year videos this year, but I want to do this little unhaul. I've got 7 books here I think it's time for me to get rid of. I have read all of them. I've not talked about all of them on this channel, so I'm going to do a little wrap-up of each one to say goodbye to it. Most of these were 3-star books for me, so books I would recommend under certain circumstances. The only book that I have that was a 2-star read was this one. This is The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan. I read this near the end of last year. It's one of the books that had been on my TBR for the longest. This had been on my Goodreads TBR since 2016. That was my first year on BookTube, and I remember this being a little bit of a BookTube darling in some of the circles of people I was watching at the time. And I hadn't been actively prompted to pick this up for any reason in all those years, but I still sort of thought of it as something that could be a 5-star read for me because of those vague memories of other people's gushing positive reviews, I guess. And extremely unfortunately, this was my least favorite book I read all last year in 2025. And I want to emphasize that my least favorite does not mean it was the worst book I read last year. I think there were worse books, but I enjoyed them more, and this was the book I enjoyed the least. Here's the thing I've come to realize about the books that I was picking up around the beginning of my BookTube journey, based on the channels I was watching at the time, is that I was watching a lot of people who were more heavily into litfic than me, and I was enjoying their videos. But when a litfic girly describes a book as being fantastical and folklore inspired and magical, I, as a more genre reader, have a different level of expectation for what those descriptors mean than what that reviewer sometimes means. And that's where the mismatch in expectation versus reality comes from here, I think. Because is this book speculative in its setting, in its premise? Yes, absolutely. Is it folklore inspired? Also, yes. But this is a book that is, I would say, no plot, all vibes, but the singular vibe in question is sad people on boats. This is a drowned world that you're never quite certain if it's our world in the future or not. There is a slight magical twist that is revealed kind of later in the story. It's about 2 young women whose stories only briefly intersect with each other towards the beginning and again at the end. And by the way, that was also another thing where my expectations were not met, because I was certain I had heard this described as being a sapphic love story of some sort. And I think you can read it that way, but it is purely subtextual. I do not think they kiss. They truly barely interact with each other in this book, and then at the end you get an epilogue where they're raising a child together. This did end up having some themes that I didn't think were badly done, but that I didn't personally enjoy. One of them was pregnancy and motherhood. I would also give this a content warning for animal abuse. There are separate, unrelated instances of it in both of the storylines. So I personally did not enjoy this, but if you like sad people on boats, get your sad people on boats here. All of the rest of these now are 3-star books for me, so these are things I feel generally more positive towards. Sort of on the other side of the spectrum from the Gracekeepers, which was kind of not fulfilling any of my genre expectations, is The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, which to me was a little bit too much of a formulaic genre fantasy. I feel like I've read versions of this story enough times before that I didn't feel like this was giving me anything new. This is the first book in a debut series called the Sand Sea Trilogy that is Middle Eastern inspired. I know the second book is already out. I don't know about the third. I think if you're looking for something on the lighter end of epic fantasy that's not too challenging, that is fast-paced, entertaining. Maybe if you're someone who feels like you're aging out of YA and is looking to get into adult fantasy, this might be a great book to pick up. For me, though, it wasn't giving me anything new and exciting enough to make me feel like I wanted to pick up the sequels. My next book here is Bitter Medicine by Tsai. This is like an urban fantasy romance. It's about a woman who's from this like powerful clan of Chinese magic practitioners, and her love interest is this guy who is half elf. He works for Oberon, and everyone thinks he's super scary because he has a terrible reputation, but he's actually very sweet. And I don't know, I was very into this romance. Like, this is mostly a romance, and I was into the romance. It is friends to lovers, which I enjoy way more than the more popular enemies to lovers that we get so much of. I like friends to lovers. At the beginning of this book, they are friends, but they are both incognito, and neither of them knows the other's true identities, and they're both way more powerful than they're pretending to be. I was frustrated with the, like, urban fantasy world building of it, however, because I felt there was a lot that did not get sufficiently explained about how the magical world worked in this book, and like how it interacted with the mortal world. Like, what are the rules here? What are the power structures? Like, how much of the magical world is Oberon's agency, like, really in charge of? And then there was also a specific plot thing that annoyed me so much. It's one of those things that I just should have been able to let go of, but I couldn't. Where there is this important point in the plot where the protagonist learns a vital piece of information that she needs to tell her brother so that her brother will stop hating her boyfriend. And then stuff happens and she just doesn't tell him for way too long. And like, I know you're distracted, but you learned something important that you need to tell your brother, and no one else can tell him. So I think this was a case of, like, I was really into the thing this book was mostly concerned with doing, but the trappings around it weren't quite strong enough for me. Up next, I have The Left-Handed Booksellers of London by Garth. Despite the fact that I have read both this and the second book in the series because they were both nominated for the Lodestar, I don't own the second book in this series. I think I got it from the library. I remember shockingly little detail about this. This is, again, urban fantasy. This is YA urban fantasy, and I think my biggest problem here is just that YA urban fantasy is such a hard sell for me. If you like YA urban fantasy, by all means, read this book. You'll probably enjoy it. It's a little bit historical. It's set in the 1980s. It's supposed to be like an alternate 1980s where some history is different, but there's never really any reason that that should be. That's just a little puzzling to me. The characters are fine, they're charming. I do like the central cast of characters in these books. I just found the plot relatively uninteresting, and like the urban fantasy setting of it all also not super interesting to me. It occurred to me, because I have liked Garth Nix before. I read the main trilogy, the Aporson trilogy. I haven't read the other spin-off books in that world, but to me the best part of those books was the super cool fantasy world building, and that's what this just doesn't have. And I guess without that, there wasn't enough here for me to really care. Okay, I feel like this next one is going to make me enemies, because I feel like this book has a lot of fans. But I only gave 3 stars to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. This is a contemporary, cozy fantasy, the sort that takes place in the real world, but there are people who are secretly witches. It's about a young woman who is a witch who takes this job tutoring these 3 young girls who are also witches at this house with their caretakers, and falls in love with a grumpy guy. It's a grumpy sunshine romance where she's sunshine and he's grumpy, and I have so little patience for that. I am tired of sunshine girls with grumpy men. So I would say there are like 3 major things going on in this book. There's like the child rearing aspect of it, the romance aspect of it, and then there's like this relationship that the protagonist Mika has with her kind of adopted mother figure. The romance didn't do much for me. The whole magical children thing felt derivative to me of specifically The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is fine. That's a very popular book. You expect with any popular book that you will have lots of other books that are trying to tap into something similar that people seem to really like. I just don't think this book did it especially well. I didn't feel like I got a strong sense of the personalities of the children. I couldn't tell them apart. It was that third point, the relationship with her like mentor adoptive mother figure, that was the most interesting part of the book to me. There's definitely commentary there about like interracial adoption in the UK that I thought was interesting, but that whole part of the story felt like it was on the back burner for most of the book, and I was getting more of the things that were not as interesting. But also this type of fantasy that is just the real world, but some people secretly have magic, is just moderately uninteresting to me in general. I feel like that is the theme, because I am a genre reader, and all of these books are in my genre, but they are doing the genre in ways that I'm specifically a little less interested in. Okay, the next book is Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. This is a historical sapphic fantasy romance that has this incredible narrative device that was so much fun as a concept, but had the side effect of making the romance not work as well for me, which was such a conflicting feeling to have about this book. The framing device here that is so much fun is that the narrator is basically Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream, but he's been banished from Fairy and is living in the mortal world, trying to make ends meet by publishing romance novels based on like things that he has witnessed as a magical fairy spirit running around in the mortal world, possibly causing a bit of mischief along the way. Delightful. Absolutely delightful. This would have been so good for me if it had been like a comedy of manners with perhaps a closed door romance. That's not the type of romance novel this is, though. And having that sort of like removed narrator for a book that is like a serious, steamy romance made it very hard for me to actually get emotionally invested in either of the characters, because you're not really in either of their heads. I had some other nitpicks about this, but mostly I felt like there was this incredible idea here that was the best thing about the book, but also somehow the worst thing about the book. And it was very frustrating for me. There were some great side characters in this, and I seriously considered checking out book 2 from the library because the second book is following one of those side characters. But I was discouraged by the fact that book 2 doesn't particularly have a very high Goodreads rating. I do usually know better than to trust Goodreads ratings for deciding when to pick up a book. But when it's a series where the first book is going to be not for everyone, and you sort of expect that to have maybe a lower average Goodreads rating, I look at that and I kind of expect book 2 to be much higher rated than book 1, because the people who go on to book 2 are the people who want more of that. And so when it doesn't, when there isn't that higher Goodreads rating for the sequel, I get nervous. So I don't know, has anyone actually read the second book in this series? And can you tell me, is it fun? Is it worth getting from the library? I am unhauling this, but I'm not completely discounting the possibility that I might still pick up the sequel from the library. And then the last book I have to unhaul today is The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. This is a Tor.com novella. This might be the book in this unhaul that I read the longest ago. It's certainly the one I remember the least about. I should have maybe been telling you when I read all of these so that you can know how much of a grain of salt you can take the accuracy of my memories on them with. But I read this one in 2023, and I remember so little about it. This is wuxia inspired. I believe it is historical, and it's set in Malaysia in a time period that I had very little historical context for. And this might also be a case of just like not doing genre quite the way I wanted it to. There was very little actual fantasy in this until the very end is what I remember. Wuxia is the genre with like the magic martial arts, but like the magic martial arts bit of the book didn't happen until the end. And I wasn't familiar enough with the history involved to know if there was like alternate history going on in the storytelling. And while I do not in any way mean to like pit authors against each other in genre niches, I remember not long after I read this reading Into the Riverlands by Ni Vo, which is one of the Singing Hills cycle books, and thinking that that book was kind of more of what I had expected this book to be, given how I had seen this book advertised by the author and possibly the publisher. It has just the most stunningly beautiful cover though, and that's why I haven't gotten rid of it until now, why I've kept it around for so long, because it is so pretty on my shelf. But I think it is time. I'm at a point where I have too many books and not enough shelf space, and honestly, this little unhaul is not going to do enough. But it's what I'm doing today. Anyhow, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you think. I hope you're having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.